practice session.
But a very necessary one, because how different the conditions are now from earlier on this morning, 9:30 to 10 o'clock, when we had what was intended to be originally the last half hour of practice before the Australian Grand Prix, and that was to enable the drivers and the team engineers to set up their cars for what was then imagined to be a dry race, as it always has been at Adelaide in previous years. In 1986 it was wet up to the race, but not including the race, and it looks as though it's going to be very different today. Now, we've had two wet Grand Prix in 1989, Canada, and any of you who think that wet weather conditions may slow down Ayrton Senna had better think again, because in Canada he was leading commandingly in conditions just like this, and you can see how bad they were until he had an engine blow and Thierry Boutsen went through to take the victory by default. Then there was the Belgian Grand Prix, where the conditions were absolutely indescribable. They were even worse than this. And that race was won by, have a guess, Ayrton Senna, with Alain Prost in second position. But of course you have to drive very differently in the wet.
Murray, the biggest problem in the wet is visibility. If you were driving at track level as those drivers are at the present time, you cannot see anything in front of you at all. Behind the car there is that rooster tail of spray. There are high-intensity red lights on the back of the cars, but look at that fog-like vision that you're seeing right there. And if you were to follow that car in close proximity, as we are looking with our long lens now, you simply don't see a thing. The biggest problem from a driver's point of view, they are following the tyre tracks of the car in front of them. No more than that. That's Ivan Capelli accelerating away. Now, of course, driving has to be smooth and gentle and progressive. You can't lay down 650 or 700 horsepower abruptly without giving it a nice gentle progression. Otherwise, the wheels just spin. Now, the cars are on wet weather tyres, and for you who were not with us earlier, we explained, Alan Jones and I, the difference between wet and dry tyres. They're now on grooved tyres to try and eliminate the risk of aquaplaning or hydroplaning. Normally these cars run on slick tyres. This would simply not be possible in the wet, because the cars would aquaplane and go right over the water instead of cutting through it. Murray, this is a nail already as one car off the road. That is Alio, and he's already had a moment. He's getting out of his car. He's already tested the conditions quite enough for today.
Yeah, I rather think, actually, Jackie, to be fair to Alio, who's inclined to go off, that it's a car problem rather than a grip problem. But I was just casting my mind back and remembering that in 1982, it was in conditions like this when Didier Pironi went into the back of Alain Prost's Renault at the Hockenheim ring, and there we are. That is Alio. You can see the nose is all deranged. I was quite wrong. I apologise. And he's got to have a new nose cone at absolute minimum. And I was saying, Didier Pironi went into the back of Alain Prost's Renault, because that was when the Frenchman was driving for the French concern, and finished Pironi's racing career.
Just a point, the racing line that was taken by Berger going around the outside of that corner was totally contrary to the line that he would use on the dry. He's trying to find a part of the road surface that gives more bite, and that's why this practice has been laid on specially by the organisers, so that the drivers can identify where the rivers of waters are lying, and then where the pools of water's lying. Very important for a driver to know the depth of water in certain places. The general rule for a racing driver, incidentally, is never to drive on the painted lines, because the coefficient of friction is different on paint than it is on the blacktop of the tar macadam, and of course never get onto the curbs if you can avoid it. The other rule, Murray, is never drive in the full width of the road, because water lies nearest the curbs because of the camber.
And that was demonstrated by the fact that Nigel Mansell actually lost the victory in the Monaco Grand Prix when he was driving for Lotus, and there incidentally is Nigel Mansell getting into a little bit of trouble, because Nigel did exactly what you said, Jackie. He hit a white line, lost grip, and went straight off into the Armco, and there's no room for error. A Monaco, and off goes Senna. My goodness, but that gives you an indication of just how lightning fast the driver's reflexes are. Spin, zoom, zoom, right round twice, and he carried on as though nothing had happened to him.
Now that indeed was also a demonstration of how quickly those cars lose adhesion. Here it goes again. Look, gentle slide and suddenly, whang, on that white surface, on the painted surface. And isn't he a lucky boy, because he didn't come in contact with that tyre wall that he could so easily have done. And that, for him, is very fortunate, because the last thing he needs now is an accident just before the end of this 30-minute session.
Yes, he went off at exactly the same place as Philippe Alliot. Now, we're timing these sessions, or this session, at least we're not. They are, the Olivetti Longines people. And 6 minutes into this extra 30 minutes of practice to enable drivers to acclimatise themselves to the wet, it is unsurprisingly Ayrton Senna fastest. Now, his time today is 1 minute 45 seconds, and that's about 20 seconds slower than the fastest time this morning, which was also Ayrton Senna. The old veteran René Arnoux that we're looking at this very moment is second fastest in the Ligier, ahead of Derek Warwick, and I am utterly confident, Jackie, that we are going to get a surprise, maybe an upset race if the conditions are like this.
Let me say this, the man that you're looking at right now, I was just looking at, in fact, René Arnoux announced at the drivers' meeting that he would be retiring after this race. He announced it publicly, so you may be seeing on your television screens today, for the last time, René Arnoux driving car number 25 for the last time in Grand Prix racing. He has been a veteran and a campaigner for a very long time.
Yes, and in his time, a very great one too, because he drove for Renault and he drove for Ferrari, and he has had a large number of victories and pole positions.
On the magical
spray up, and another car came to overtake. He may run into the back of that stationary racing car of Nannini's. That is a severe accident and a blow to Nannini. They have a spare car, they may well get it repaired, but who knows. Now the cars are slowing themselves down, coming into the pits. It will give them a little extra time to have some changes made, and of course these drivers are talking to their pits and explaining them what they might need to be done.
You see the black flag out there. What happens is that a red flag is shown at the start line, a black flag is shown by the marshal's posts around the course, and the drivers know that that means that the race or the practice is being stopped. Now there is the man who is quickest at the present moment, and he's 2.3 seconds faster as he passes a potential race winner's car. Nannini has got a problem, he'll have to get back and get out in the spare, and Ayrton Senna, as ever, is in a commanding position, 2.3 seconds faster than René Arnoux. Nannini, that you see there as third fastest, is the man whose car has just been broken, Alessandro Nannini. Jean Alesi, the Frenchman, who is a real name for 1989, fourth fastest in the wet so far, but still 20 minutes to go. And another new man, 23-year-old J.J. Lehto, ex-British Formula 3 champion, fifth fastest in the British Onyx, ahead of veteran Nelson Piquet. Eddie Cheever, who had such an awful practice qualifying because he's right down the pecking order in 22nd place. And there are the rest of them, and you'll see that Nigel Mansell is only in 12th place.
Some of the drivers that you see up towards the front end of the practice session so far, this wet session, are drivers who we haven't been seeing up the front end of the grid, mainly because they are in the less powerful cars, and there is the car of Philippe Alliot also that may well be brought back to the pit so that their mechanics can rush through the preparation for the race, as you see the heavily damaged car of Nannini's. But it could be here that the work done in this session is vital for this team, because after all, they've come out of winning the Grand Prix of Japan. They're preparing already the spare car. You can see the frenzy of work that's going on there. They of course were told of this not only by our television coverage, which they have, but they've also been told on the radio by Nannini what's going on. But the other drivers, the ones who are at the front end, such as Alesi and Lehto, Cheever, Larini and Warwick, they're in the less powerful cars. Senna's always fast, but we wouldn't have expected Arnoux up there. We wouldn't have expected Alesi or Lehto up there. They're driving hard, but in fact, what's happening is that the power is not showing itself so prominently in the wet. We'll be back to Adelaide after this commercial message.
Sort of a chance of knowing what to expect when the Grand Prix gets underway in just under an hour and a half's time. But in the meantime, let's go for a trip around the track in the dry with Derek Warwick.
Okay, we've just gone past the start-finish line through the chicane, fast in fourth gear, about 140 mile an hour. Accelerate down into third, right-hand corner. Not too important because there's a short straight just after. Stay in third, back in, brake. Hard on the brakes here in Adelaide. Back up, third again, turn right. You accelerate, third, fourth gear. You hold the car in fourth, fast left, turn right. Quite difficult corner because it's off camber. Back into third for this corner here. Fourth, fifth, up to about 130, 140 mile an hour. Fourth gear, flat. Very important that corner because you're leading on to this Brabham Straight. Brabham Straight's about 180 mile an hour. So the corner before it is obviously very important in order to keep your speed up for this straight. Back right down to second for the hairpin, slowest point of the circuit. Second, third, up to fourth for the little kink. Back down to third, hard on the brakes, turn in, a little bit on the curve. Fourth, fifth, through the right hand just before the pits. Back down into second, again important because you've got quite a fast straight. Over the start-finish line, second, third, fourth, fifth. On the limiter going underneath the bridge, back down to fourth. Quite a difficult corner, that one, because you have to clip both curbs. Back out on the outside, up to fifth, back down to third, turn right, on the power. Got a little bit crossed up going out, brakes have locked up, and oh, bang. That's not quite the way how to do that corner. As you can see, he looks a little bit annoyed with himself. I don't know, who is that driver there?
That was you, Derek, as a matter of fact. Because it's not the way to go around the track. And Alessandro Nannini certainly didn't go around the track in the way that he would have liked. His Benetton is bent, but as I said before, the car is, he's got the second car now being prepared. Okay, the cars are now lining up again for the restart of this wet weather session. We join Murray Walker.
Well, that off was an absolute catastrophe for Alessandro Nannini. The left front wheel turned back into what we call the tub, the monocoque, the chassis, and has pushed a dent right in the side of it. So there's no question of them just putting a new suspension and a new wheel on the left front. That car is out of action for the rest of this Australian Grand Prix meeting. And they're actually preparing the spare now. The drivers are waiting to come out for the rest of this 30-minute session. Now, the fact that they've had to stop this practice period does not mean to say that it is shortened. All the clocks, the timing clocks are stopped at 10 minutes and 14 seconds. That's what it was when the racing was officially stopped. There is Philippe Alliot's Lola Lamborghini with a similarly crushed nose, similarly to the tub of Nannini's car. So Berger leads out in the Ferrari, followed by teammate Nigel Mansell with another nearly 20 minutes to go. There's the man you just heard, Derek Warwick, followed by J.J. Lehto. And incidentally, thus far, 10 minutes into the 30-minute session, as Andrea De Cesaris drives out, J.J. Lehto is fifth fastest, and the conditions are appalling. They're not as bad as they would be at, say, Hockenheim in similar circumstances, because unlike Hockenheim, there are no trees around the circuit here to any great extent in Adelaide, as a result of which any breeze there may be can blow the rain spray away to some extent. But that's not to say for one moment that conditions aren't going to be really awful.
Well, I think this is a test of the driver to the ultimate ability. in Grand Prix racing, we do race in the rain. If you were in America right now at an Indianapolis race, they would stop the race and it would not run, for example, on the big oval. They would hold up the race until the weather dried up. But in fact, what's happening here is just real conditions. And of course, the conditions again are getting worse because the rain is torrential. The pools of water on the track are quite dangerous, and the drivers have got to know where they are. These drivers looking over to see where that is most likely to be the spots to look out for. But Professor, Alain Prost has never enjoyed driving in the rain. Now, none of us do. Some of us have been more competitive than others in rain conditions. It's not that we like them, but Alain Prost has many times said he just detests driving in the rain. At the British Grand Prix 2 years ago, he almost packed it in, totally racing.
Yeah, well, yes, he was in 14th position at the time when the rain came belting down, and Senna won again, incidentally. And I remember in that race, Alain Prost came in and said, I really don't see why I should risk my life in a situation where I'm not even going to finish in the points. And he had a lot of criticism. There was a French commentator who accused him of cowardice and not looking after France and himself and all the rest of it. And Alain Prost subsequently refused to be interviewed by that man. Nigel Mansell, on the other hand, drove an absolute blinder of a race to finish in second position in the Williams Judd, as it was last year, because it's 1988 that we're talking about.
Murray, I think we have a situation here where we have Alain Prost on his radio in his car.
Here at the front, they're going to give the full half-hour practice, over.
Now that's the voice of Joe Ramirez, the man who works in his car, speaking to him from the pit. Ron Dennis saying they're going to go for the full half hour.
How many minutes to go, says Prost?
It's at 10 minutes and 14 seconds so far.
Oh, Nigel Mansell!
Mansell's done it now. There's another car that's got to go back to base for a refit. Mansell will be out in the spare. And this is the absolute demonstration of how appalling the conditions are now at Adelaide. Earlier on, when Gerhard Berger was talking to Barry Sheen, he said the conditions here in the dry are very slippery. They're going to be bad, and really bad in the wet. Everybody's going off at the same place. Alio went off there. Nannini went off there. Now Mansell's gone. Now let's look at this. You see the back of the car breakaway. It fishtails. He spins around 360 degrees. He's riding on water. There is absolutely nothing he can do to get steering way. You're totally out of control, and the car is into the wall. And there's Jean Alesi, who is the chief mechanic of Ferrari, sadly shaking his head because he knows that they've got to get that spare car ready.
Now, ironically, all of the accidents, that's Nannini's accident, Alio's accident, have all been at Brewery. And there they are again throwing the red flag because Nigel Mansell, and that is Berger sitting in that car. That seems to be Gerhard Berger, surely.
It is Gerhard Berger. No, it's not. It's Mansell. I apologise. See the red helmet?
Ah, yes, there
and
it
the
is.
Union Jack. You see the Union Jack there?
My God, it's still flying. Well, the red flag has been given. It's just a declaration of the severe conditions. This is going to be a very exciting television race. It's going to be a wet race for our spectators who are live sitting out in the bleachers and grandstands here. But that accident of Nigel Mansell's was a very fast corner. The car got out of shape. Then it whipped around. Almost what I call a motorcycle accident, where it goes into what I call a tank slapper. It went suddenly in the direction in which the driver had turned the steering wheel, and it whipped around and suddenly got right out of control on that water. And once those big tires goes, and
that's Prost. He's gone off somewhere.
And now, he's after the red flag, and it's right on at the back of the racetrack here. Right on, way over here.
It's on Victoria Park Racecourse, just in front of the grandstand over there. And, well, I mean, Adelaide is turning into a river, and sadly, Jackie, I have now to start questioning in my mind whether or not the race will be able to go on if it continues like this.
Oh, I think the race will go on. It may have a slightly delayed start. Who knows? There's no damage, it would appear, to Alain Prost's car. The white flag being shown there is the pace cars, and there you see from our helicopter position, apparently no damage being done. Here again is the Nigel Mansell accident. Look, it was almost on the straight there. Suddenly the car hit water, spun round, went in the direction out. He's got the wheels locked up. You can see there's no spray coming from the wheels. That means they're not turning. So he had the brakes fully on, like all of us would under those conditions, and a heavy impact. And there you see Ayrton Senna being reversed back into his garage.
Now there's the man who's metaphorically laughing. His teammate Alain Prost has gone off. He'll have to do work on his car. It won't have done anything for Alain Prost's peace of mind because he's lost the car and will be very, very unhappy. Senna, on the other hand, has got a whole car. He knows he's got away with a 360-degree spin. And I think he's going to be much more relaxed.
Much has been talked about in this morning's papers of his belief in God. This is the city of churches. And in fact, I think he must have visited every church this morning of every denomination because he got away with it.
Hello, there's an ambulance down there.
That's Nigel.
Yes.
I think he's hurt his legs.
Yes, well, I'm just wondering actually, Jackie, whether he may have hurt his neck. He always wears a neck brace. And he's got a neck weakness, and from the way Nigel Mansell is moving and the way he waved to the crowd there, I do not think he is in the best of shape.
Professor Watkins, I think, is the man leaning down there. Is it the prof?
Yes, it is.
That's his white hair there?
Yes.
Well, he's a man who's pretty tough on the drivers. He makes his own mind up about whether there should be in ambulances or not.
Jackie, look at Nigel Mansell in the car now. He has the same posture that he had in the Japanese when he went off in practice.
Well, I don't think it can be that serious, because I'll tell you, if it was, Professor Watkins would have put him in an ambulance with a brace on, Murray. This man is probably one of the leading neurosurgeons in the world, and Nigel chose to go into that car. The prof would have overruled them and would have put him in an ambulance if there had been anything wrong. So Professor Watkins really is the expert. For Nigel just to be sitting in the car with his head back, I'm not suggesting he's not uncomfortable and he's not hurting, but it can't be really serious.
Well, Nigel coming back, we'll see whether he gets out of the car and whether he does anything about getting into his spare Ferrari. Now, for what it's worth, with now nearly 15 minutes of this 30-minute extra session having been completed, and you can see in the background there Alain Prost's car being towed in, or about to be towed in. Ayrton Senna has been fastest, 1 minute 45.5, and that is faster, much faster than René Arnoux, the tow line being connected to Prost's McLaren. Well, Senna is there. You'll be back with us soon.
Ridiculously dangerous out there.
I tell you what, if they start this race in conditions like this, then I would say all the philosophy what they have is not right, because to say Senna is a dangerous driver, okay, that's the business of them. But to start a race on this is much more dangerous. And I tell you, I'm not a driver but don't like take risk. But this risk today is far way too much. On the straight, maybe the first car can handle the situation, the second car can handle the situation. But it's still difficult for them because you have so much aquaplaning. But the cars behind don't see anything, and you have no chance to go away from the track if somebody stops in front of you. You have just pedal walls, and you cannot leave the track. So it means if a car spins in front of you, stays like this, you go in straight. And it's the most dangerous what for drivers can happen. And I think safety side, no way to start under these conditions.
Yeah, the whole thing is, it goes beyond the realms of skill. It's not skill to drive in conditions like that. It's just stupidity, really, isn't it?
You know, it's always, you always have to make a compromise. And I'm a driver would like to do, okay, go. But this is just so far away. It's, you know, you see in every corner crash somebody, and every 10 seconds you have a moment where the car is not possible to control. So I think it's just wrong.
Okay, thanks a lot, Gerhard. Over to you, Alan.
Okay, Barry, thank you very much. Well, with me is Alain Prost. Alain, obviously very, very slippery conditions.
Very slippery, a lot of paddles in the straight, and even if you don't want to push on, don't want to take risks, you always take a lot of risks, especially in the straight. I mean, you can't control your speed around the corners, but in the straight, if you want to push on, you have an aquaplaning problem.
Okay, and what about visibility? A lot of water staying on the circuit?
Yes, a lot. It's very, very bad. I mean, I suppose, and I guess they are going to postpone the race maybe 1 hour. That would be good for everybody and very safe for the drivers, but I don't know if it's going to be the case.
Okay, Alan, thank you very much. Good luck.
Alan Jones there talking with Alain Prost, and Barry Sheene before that with Gerhard Berger, who didn't mix his words. He said, no go, this race shouldn't go ahead.
Yes, very difficult decision for the organisers and for the stewards of the meeting. Keep in mind there are 34 countries right now taking live telecast of this Grand Prix. Now that shouldn't be taken into consideration in the interest of safety, but there will be pressure exerted by a great many people to make sure that this event takes place in some way. The conditions out there, visibility as was being discussed, and here you see the damaged car of Nigel Mansell being brought into his garage area. There's no severe damage to Nigel's car, but nevertheless it's going to have to be repaired. If the race is delayed as the Belgium Grand Prix was delayed, it may be that this front will move out and allow a little bit of dry track to come through, and that these conditions will change during the race. But at the moment, it's difficult for us sitting up in a commentary position to say whether the event should take place or not. I've driven in many very dangerous races where visibility has been caused by fog, not only by spray. We've started the race, we've finished it, and it is our responsibility to drive in a manner in which we consider to be fast enough to be safe while still being competitive. Very difficult. It's a decision that will be, of course, because it's the last race in the year, be a serious one. And that is something that I'm afraid we're going to have to wait and hear what the stewards say. The trouble, I think, that Berger's seeing here is that some of the people making the decision may not be as expert as the drivers. But it's fair also to say that Alain Prost was a little more moderate in his observations than Gerhard.
But if you've got drivers who are, say, thinking along the lines of Berger, who don't want to be there, don't want to know about it, what can you expect from a driver like that if he's forced to take part?
No, he does believe that it is too wet in these conditions, clearly, but Gerhard would probably still race because he has a contract and he's obliged to do so, and he's a professional. Ferrari wouldn't insist on him doing so, and it is his last race for Ferrari if he chose to drop out of it. But it would be very difficult for him media-wise in every other way. The only driver I can remember ever having the courage, if you put it that way, of his convictions was Niki Lauda in 1976, I think it was, at the Grand Prix in Japan, when he could have won the World Championship by staying in the race. It was very, very wet. He chose to withdraw from the race. James Hunt went on to win the World Championship because of Lauda's withdrawal. Lauda did the right thing for Niki Lauda. After all, he had come back from death almost during that year. But my goodness, was he criticised. He was criticised throughout the world for his act, particularly by Ferrari.
And paid a price, I gather.
Yes, but he was right. For Niki Lauda, he was right. And I admired his courage and his decision in that particular case.
Well, you've got to admire Gerhard Berger then.
For being outspoken on this area, I do. I have no argument with what Gerhard says because we've just seen witness that so many cars have been going off the road.
We don't know about Nigel Mansell at this stage, but he would have aggravated a neck injury. There's no two ways about that.
My speculation, as I said when I was on the air,
hasn't he not?
Yes, he's had damage to it, and more severe damage was done in Japan at the beginning, the end of 1987, and that lasted with him for quite a long time. But if that is the case, I don't understand Nigel wanting to go back in the Nissan, even with Frank Gardner's gentle driving. If he thought he had, and there's this accident occurring again, look at this spin out. Now watch, there's the contact with the wall. It really wasn't that bad, but Nigel's head gets knocked forward, as all our heads do when we come in contact with things. What happened after that, although surprised me, because when Professor Watkins arrived, and an expert he truly is, he was pointing towards the ambulance. Nigel said, no, I'm going in the Nissan. Frank Gardner drove him round in the Nissan to the medical centre here on the track. Professor Watkins rode in the ambulance, and came back to examine with the rest of the medical crew here Nigel Mansell's complaint of his neck. And you saw his head lolling back in that seat with his hand up as if he was in great pain. If he really was in great pain, Ken, he should have been in the ambulance, because these nerves can be severely damaged, particularly in vertebrae. And after all, he had beside him one of the great experts of the world in neurosurgery. So I would want to hear from the professor on that as to what he felt about Nigel's injuries when he got to him.